this idea of from moving from to be or not to be to let be. And I think that's sort of what encapsulates kind of Hamlet's development as character. And let me just explain. I mean, we do know that at the beginning of the text, from the beginning of the text, you don't even have to get to Act 3 to have a suicidal Hamlet, di ba? Act 1 pa lang, oh, that this too solid flesh would melt and thaw and thin to a dew, oh, that everlasting and that fixes martyrdom and self-slaughter, you know, that first soliloquy. We already have him sort of in love with the idea of dying and death and wanting to die. But also you find the conflict in him that he cannot die, or he cannot bring himself to that because he's horrified of death. And that, in fact, he doesn't believe in death. I mean, that's the one big revelation. He doesn't believe, not I mean, he doesn't believe in death. He, in fact, believes in the finality of it. One of the biggest revelations of the to be or not to be soliloquy, of which you watch many versions, is you find out that in that soliloquy, that he doesn't believe the ghost. Right? Remember how he describes death in To Be or Not to Be, when he talks about to sleep, perchance to dream. There's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come must bring us pause, he says. He's like, he doesn't know. You can't describe death as sleep because, like sleep, you don't know what dreams will come. What comes after death. That undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler ever returns. Remember that. He says that in To Be or Not to Be. Death is that undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler ever returns. And when you read that line, you realize, oh, fuck, he doesn't believe the ghost. Because what is a ghost except a traveler from that undiscovered country? And you realize this is why he has to put on that play. This is why he has all that ploys of madness and tries to get at the truth himself. Because he cannot simply accept that there is, a traveler from this undiscovered country. He cannot simply accept that there are things beyond our philosophy, Horatio. These are things that he cannot accept at the beginning of the play. Right? So it's a radical change. Once the character of Hamlet has actually encountered death, in that he's actually killed someone, right? And that's Polonius. And then he's sent off to England. And you see this great change in him. And it's one of the most beautiful things that Shakespeare ever does. Ito na ako. I'm starting. Is that when he returns to a scene of death. Right? He returns to a graveyard. Of course, your great foreshadowing bells are going off, and then he sees Ophelia there, and then he'll jump into her grave. Laertes will jump into the grave, and you're like, woohoo, foreshadowing bells. But even before that happens, the ground of his return is the ground of death. But that ground is also inhabited by two grave diggers, who are also sometimes called the two clowns, right? Isn't it wonderful that this big, horrible mystery and scary thing that has in the beginning of the play been represented by a scary ghost is now a graveyard with clowns. And the clowns are throwing bones around and making up stories about, what this character was. And Hamlet, and this is what signals a change, is suddenly not his like morose, angsty, nihilistic self. He participates in the throwing around of bones, and he picks up, and that's that famous scene. Everybody who has not read Hamlet thinks that Hamlet with the skull is To Be or Not to Be. They are the badouis because they don't understand the play. When in fact, when he picks up that skull, it is the skull of a jester, a clown. And how oxymoronic a metaphor and an image is that? Iba si Shakespeare talaga. A clown who is a figure of life and humor and happiness, lightness, is also a skull, is also death. And that you have the entire sort of spectrum of human existence in that one image. Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio. He was a jester in my father's court, right? And you realize, my God, something has changed. And